Hello, we're here in New York City at the Open RAN North America event, and just yesterday we were at the 5G network strategies and something.
Something like that.
Oh.
We need
Anyway,
a new name.
Sterling Perrin.
5G transport.
Welcome to this interview that I can't, at this event that I can't properly name. But it was a good event because the feedback was phenomenal. A lot of people are excited about the evolution of the transport network and where it's going now that 5G is finally here and carriers are making decisions. Was there any kind of, I guess, transport architecture discussion that seemed to stand out from the proceedings yesterday?
Yeah, it was, and it was just good. We've done the event virtual for the past couple of years, and it was nice just to be back and the engagement
Absolutely.
you get on a physical event, and it was small audience.
Yeah.
But it made it more open discussion,
Yeah.
I thought, and probably the most open discussion that we've had maybe since our first year.
Mm-hmm.
I did in the opening comments, I did a little bit of a comparison between 2017 and 2022, and the reality is at a high level, you know, the same topics. We're still talking about eCPRI and
Yeah.
5G MEC and
Yeah.
centralized RAN and front haul and that stuff. But the context has changed, and I think we got a real good flavor of that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you asked specifically about, you know, any of the kind of the architectural discussions. The centralized RAN discussion, really led by Reggie Collette from US Cellular,
Yeah.
I thought was the best explanation so far of a kind of a use case in centralizing the RAN, not the rationale for why they're doing it, the exact steps, and kind of how they've thought through the whole problem, and the fact that they're doing it. It's some is done. They've
Yeah.
got plans they outlined for next year. It's a done deal. So it's happened.
Yeah, that was a really compelling presentation. It was interesting too because I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Is that where the RAN is going for larger carriers, or did that just happen to work out for them because of their unique kind of market position? You know?
Yeah, no, I don't think their position is unique at all. In fact, you could argue even the other way that with rural populations and kind of less dense cities that they would operate in, because that's kind of what they do, there would be less of a need. The very dense cities like New York and Boston and Las Vegas are really where the centralized RAN business case works best. And the big operators are doing it. Verizon has been doing it. They started with 4G, they continued with 5G. All the big operators are doing fairly early stage, but are investing in actually building out this centralization of the function. It's the physical movement of the baseband into these hub sites with the radio, and then whereas the transport guy, where I come in, is that front haul.
Right.
That is absolutely happening, at least in the U.S.
And
now.
what is the architectural or sort of the technology change that has to happen in the front haul or in the transport side to accommodate a more centralized architecture?
Yeah, it's basically was done with the 3GPP, the decomposition of the RAN, where you could separate the radio unit and the distributed unit and the central unit, and that opened the door to have these elements, physically separated. From an optical standpoint, it's the early phase, and where US Cellular is and where the other big operators are is a fairly simple-ish thing they've done. They're running basically dark fibers. It's an optical connection between those two spots, either dark fibers or WDM.
Okay.
So it's operationally, it's the simplest way. You have to do a lot of planning, as also US Cellular was talking about, in terms of, you have to obtain these fibers, the dark fibers. You have to negotiate contracts, get the fiber built out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you've seen Verizon spending, is part of why you've seen Verizon investing so much in fiber over the past couple of years, and now AT&T is, certainly doing the exact same thing. So the fiber, it's the very low level, the physical stuff needs to be put in place. And then there's more complicated things that can come from there, and it's kind of where we're, not quite stuck, but still in the early stages. Some of the discussions we had yesterday were like around packet front haul, which is another evolution, but it brings in, a set of complexity to do it, and some of the technologies. I even learned myself that the TSN for front haul, which I thought was, really a done deal. The not full representation of the industry because it was a small event, but for the group that we had there yesterday, largely saying the TSN for front haul is actually not a good option. So that was news to me. So that's the kind of the next iteration, packet front haul. How do you
Right.
do it? And then, Reggie Collette indicated that's stuff they're going to look at
Right.
for the future, as well as virtual RAN and moving forward. But his point, which was a very good one, is you have to get this physical, the fibers,
Yeah.
and you are physically separating and the locations for pooling the baseband resources together. That's all happening now in places that are dense cities. The other important thing with anything front haulers, there's a very strict distance. Under 10 kilometers is the benchmark,
Okay.
which is dictated by ultimately physics and the communication between these separated elements. And it comes, when you turn that time into a distance, it's 10 miles or 10 kilometers or less.
10 kilometers or less, and then that's what, and then that all kind of adds up to making the network itself simpler to operate, I guess, because you're making fewer. I would say if it's centralized, aren't you making fewer decisions or sort of processes involved? I mean,
You're improving. There's ways you can save money by not having having to go out to all these separate sites. It's all in one area, so in one location.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're pooling resources, you're sharing power, et cetera. And Reggie, and in the panel, we also talked a bit about there's also, as you move to higher data rates for more advanced services for 5G, this coordination that's required for like carrier aggregation is a lot better in a centralized. So
Okay.
for kind of an ultimate scaling.
yeah.
The other really interesting thing, and this had come up in our surveys, and I never fully understood why, but one of the motivations, we asked operators, why are you looking at centralized RAN? And they said reliability, and I didn't really understand the why behind that, but it was
Okay.
really a top choice. And Reggie Collette again kind of gave a really good explanation of the reliability, where he said the touch points in the network, when you eliminate all these areas of kind of product interaction and human interaction throughout the network, it reduces. And he said the vast majority of his outages and errors his outages are due to some sort of error in the equipment malfunction. But
Okay.
he had to use the word for it. I forget his exact term he used. But it's not fiber cuts.
Okay.
So that moving to centralization, kind of a long-winded way of saying, is improving their reliability from the architecture itself. And reliability, we know, is critical for 5G, and we know from the survey that operators are. So that's something that's, I don't know where it initiated from, but the operators are seizing on to rely. So there's a bunch of reasons they can do it. There's challenges as well, but
Yeah.
we've been talking to us like a decade, and
Yeah.
more, as
It's a
Gabriel had
topic
said,
that
and-
comes up, again and again. But it's interesting that now it's starting to be done in a pretty big way, and
It is.
there's actually some payoff to it. Like you said, Mr. Collette's whole presentation was, we did this. Here's what we've learned. And that was
I thought it
refreshing.
was great. I mean, yeah. So we had a very, a lot of the day was dedicated to that kind of architecture. It wasn't the only topic, but that was a big one, and it's because it's real, not because we're, theoretically.
Real quick, you want to weigh in on the use of white boxes? In
Yeah,
the
that was
transport
another
network.
interesting.
That came up a couple of times.
And again, we were a subset of the industry because we didn't have everybody represented on the panels, but Juniper made a very good point, Tim Pinnell, about ask the audience, raise your hand if you're using Broadcom chips in any of your equipment that you use or sell, and almost everybody raised their hand, and his point was, Juniper and Cisco and anybody that's doing non-white box is using Broadcom for a lot of this stuff. And so as a piece of hardware, what's the difference really? And the difference tends to be it's kind of the business model, the model, and is that compelling enough? And I thought it was a very strong argument.
Yeah. It's hard to say one over the other when the guts of it are all the same, and really what changes is, like you said, the volume ordering, or something to do with the business model, not necessarily the technology.
It certainly tackled the cost question in a way that I thought was very impactful. And we know AT&T had really doubled down on these white box routers. They did not speak at the event, knock on AT&T, but they're the only ones that we know of in North America who are, a major operator that have invested like this. So the others, it hasn't really caught on. Outside of North America, TIP has a lot of, they show a slide with literally dozens of logos of big name operators globally doing this white box router for 5G. But if you look at the logos in US, it's only been AT&T so far. And
Okay.
so yeah.
We'll see what happens next.
So-
And we'll do this again next year, hopefully.
I hope
Maybe
so.
sometime
I
soon.
hope so.
All right, Sterling,
we'll
thanks
move
so
the
much.
needle. All right. Thanks, Phil.